Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at Soldier's Home in our time. We've been examining themes of love and themes of war that we see within this pivotal work that Hemingway writes in 1925. And one thing that I want you to think about with this, you're going to see a soldier named Harold Krebs coming home from war. I want you to think about how he was before before he went to war, and how he's changed after he's come to war. And I'm going to post these diagnostic criteria for PTSD. I want you to read through this as you go through his story and as we go through the lecture. I want you to think about, does he meet any of these requirements? And it's kind of interesting as we go through this, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about this at the end, how close Hemingway gets to some of this diagnostic criteria. Writing this in 1925, when at the time the medical communities thought that these soldiers who were coming from home from war that were changed, they described it as being called what is called shell shock, right? The idea for this is that they were nervous and they had these mental breakdowns, but the treatment was for them to take an aspirin, to take a vacation, and then they'll be fine within a couple months. They didn't really understand the deep psychological impact of PTSD. And I just want to go through a couple of the criteria, and just to point out as we go through it. Criteria A, you have to have direct exposure. You have to be a witness in person, indirectly or directly. You have to be able to have some type of event that threatens your life, right? And so I want you to think about if that's going to be true for Harold Krebs. Intrusion symptoms, so these are the symptoms: recurrent involuntary intrusive memories, traumatic nightmares, dissociative reactions like flashbacks, intense prolonged distress at exposure to traumatic reminders, and markedly physiological reactivity after exposure to traumatic stimuli. So that physiological reactivity is when your body starts shaking, right? Physiologically means your body movement. Avoidance trauma-related efforts, or trauma-related thoughts or feelings, or trauma-related external reminders, right? So people, situations, things that remind you of the trauma. D, negative alterations in mood, right? Inability to recall key features, that would be memory loss. Persistent negative beliefs and expectations about oneself. Persistent distorted blame of self or others. Persistent negative trauma-related emotions such as fear, horror, anger, guilt, or shame. Markedly diminished interest in pre-traumatic significant activities. Feeling of alienated or from others, detachment or estrangement. And constricted range of effect, persistent inability to experience positive emotions like love, right? I want you to think about if these elements match Krebs's behavior as he comes home from war. Thinking about Krebs before he went to war, we have the first paragraph. Krebs went to war from a Methodist college in Kansas. There is a picture which shows him among his fraternity brothers, all of them wearing exactly the same height and style or collar. Thinking about that first sentence, we see a lot about Harold Krebs. Number one, he was going to college, which shows that he had some type of future in mind. And it wasn't just a regular college, it was a Methodist college, which shows that he has these religious beliefs, right? He shows, within the second sentence, we see that there is a picture which shows him among his fraternity brothers, right? So he fits in all together. And then the third sentence, we read more about him and his thoughts. He enlisted in the Marines in 1917. So he didn't wait till he was drafted. He had this, desire to have patriotism, right? And did not return to the United States until the 2nd Division returned from the Rhine in the summer of 1919. And so because he enlisted, he had this set service time that he had to serve. If you're drafted, as soon as the war is over, you're released, right? There is a picture which shows him on the Rhine, which is a river in Germany, with 2 German girls and another corporal. Krebs and the corporal look too big for their uniforms. I want you to think about why that is. What have they been doing in the aftermath of war, right? The war ended. There was a ceasefire in 1918, on November 11th, 1918. And then the actual signing of Versailles didn't happen until about a year later in 1919. And so there wasn't any firing for a whole year. And so what has Krebs been doing in the off fighting time? The German girls are not beautiful, and the Rhine does not show in the picture. By the time Krebs returned to his hometown in Oklahoma, the greeting of heroes was over. And when you think about why, what's the effect that that's going to have on him? He came back much too late. The men from the town who had been drafted had all been welcomed elaborately on their return. And I want you to think about why that's going to be a problem for Krebs. There had been a great deal of hysteria. Now the reaction set in. People seemed to think it was rather ridiculous for Krebs to be getting home so late, years after the war has been over. And what this shows is his society has moved on. But who hasn't moved on from the war? Who hasn't been able to move on from the war? And how that's going to produce this kind of growing gap between him and others. At first, Krebs, who had been at Bellieu Wood, Cesson, Champagne, and Saint-Michel, these are all some of the biggest battles of World War I, and in the Argonne, did not want to talk about the war at all. I want you to think about why that would be. Later, he felt the need to talk, but no one wanted to hear about it. Why don't people want to hear about the war? His town had heard too many atrocity stories to be thrilled by actualities. Krebs found that to be listened to at all, he had to lie. And after he had done this twice, he too had a reaction against the war and against talking about it. Why do you think he doesn't like to lie about the war, right? The only way that he gets people to listen to him is to lie. So why doesn't he like that, right? When you think about what's happening, a distaste for everything that had happened to him in the war set in because of the lies he told. All the times he had been able to make him feel cool and clear inside himself when he thought of them. The time so long back when he had done the one thing, the only thing for a man to do, easily and naturally, when he might have done something else, right? What does he do? He continues to push on. When he wants to, the natural instinct when you're confronted with death is to run away from it, right? But he pushes on. Now, those moments to him lost their cool, valuable quality and then were lost themselves. And when you think about how that's going to provide further trauma for him. His lies were quite unimportant lies and consisted of attributing to himself things other men had seen, done, or heard of, and stating as a fact certain apocryphal incidents familiar to all soldiers. Even his lies were not sensational at the pool room. His acquaintances, who had heard detailed accounts of German women found chained to machine guns in the Argonne forest, and who could not comprehend or were barred by their patriotism from interest in, any German machine gunners who were not chained were not thrilled by his stories. Krebs acquired the nausea in regard to experience that the result of untruth or exaggeration. And when he occasionally met another man who had really been a soldier and they talked for a few minutes in the dressing room at a dance, he fell into the easy pose of the old soldier among other soldiers. I want you to think about that sentence. There's a couple ideas that are important. Well, how does Krebs feel about lying, right? Krebs acquires the nausea in regard to experience that resulted from truth or exaggeration. And then the second thing is, when he sees another soldier, what happens to him, right? What does this external cue do to him? Continuing on, that he had been badly, sickeningly frightened all of the time. In this way, he lost everything. During this time, it was late summer. He was sleeping late in bed, getting up to walk down to the library to get a book, eating lunch at home, reading on the front porch until he became bored, and then walking down through the town to spend the hottest hours of the day in the cool dark of the pool room. He loved to play pool. And so what's the bulk of his day generally look like, day in and day out? In the evening, he practiced on his clarinet, strolled downtown, read, and went to bed. He was still a hero to his two young sisters. His mother would give him breakfast in bed if he wanted it. She often came in when he was in bed and asked him to tell her about the war. But her attention always wandered. I want you to think about why that's a problem for him and for her. His father was non-committal. Before Krebs went away to the war, he had never been allowed to drive the family motor car. His father was in the real estate business and always wanted the car to be at his command when he required it to take his clients out in the country to show them a piece of farm property. The car always stood outside the First National Bank building, where his father had an office on the second floor. Now, after the war, it was still the same car. So again, as we go through this, I want you to think about what's changed in the town and what hasn't changed in the town, right? Because that's going to be part of Krebs' experience reacclimating to Oklahoma. Nothing was changed in the town except that the young girls had grown up, but they lived in such a complicated world of already defined alliances and shifting feuds that Krebs did not feel the energy or the courage to break into it. And so again, think about these external cues. What is it that the girls represent to him? He liked to look at them, though. They were so nice. There were so many good-looking young girls. Most of them had their hair cut short. When he went away, only little girls wore their hair like that, or girls that were fast. They all wore sweaters and shirtwaists with round Dutch collars. It was a pattern. He liked to look at them from the front porch as they walked on the other side of the street. What does he like about them? What does he find interesting about them? But then what doesn't he like about them? When does he like them, right? As they're walking on the other side of the street. He liked to watch them walking under the shade of the trees. He liked the round Dutch collars of other sweaters. He liked their silk stockings and flat shoes. He liked their bobbed hair and the way they walked. When he was in town, their appeal to him was not very strong. What happens? What's the difference when they're in town? He did not like them when he saw them in the Greek's ice cream parlor. He did not want them themselves, really. They were too complicated. So again, what do they symbolize for him? There was something else. Vaguely, he wanted a girl, but he did not want to have to work to get her. He would like to have a girl, but he did not want to have to spend a long time getting her. He did not want to get in the intrigue and the politics. He did not want to have to do any courting. He did not want to tell any more lies. It wasn't worth it. And so there's two things I want you to think about what do they represent and what might he be forced to do, and why doesn't he want to do it? Why doesn't he want to go through with this, right? So a couple thoughts to think about it and why it's not worth it. He did not want any consequences. He did not want any consequences ever again. He wanted to live along without consequences. Besides, he did not really need a girl. The army had taught him that. It was all right to pose as though you had to have a girl. Nearly everybody did that. But it wasn't true. You didn't need a girl. That was the funny thing. First, a fellow boasts how girls mean nothing to him, that he never thought of them, that they could not touch him. Then a fellow boasts that he could not get along without girls, that he had to have them all the time, that he could not go to sleep without them. That was all a lie. It was a lie both ways. You did not need a girl unless you thought about them. He learned that in the army. Then sooner or later, you always got one. When you were really ripe for a girl, you always got one. You did not have to think about it. Sooner or later, it would come. He learned that in the army. Now he would have liked a girl if she had come to him and not wanted to talk. But here at home, it was all too complicated, right? So what are these external cues that he's picking up? He knew he could not get through it all again. Again, what is that thought of, can he not get through it all again, right? So some might suggest that maybe he had a girlfriend before, but we don't necessarily see that within the context of this particular story. So there's something else that he believes that he cannot get through again, right? Thinking about the war and how the war overshadows this particular story. It was not worth the trouble. That was the thing about French girls and German girls. There was not all this talking. You couldn't talk much and you didn't need to talk. It was simple and you were friends. He thought about France and then he began to think about Germany. On the whole, he liked Germany better. He did not want to leave Germany. He did not want to come home. Still, he had to come home. He sat on the front porch, and so he's having all these thoughts while he's sitting there thinking. He liked the girls that were walking along the other side of the street. He liked the look of them much better than the French girls or the German girls. But the world, and this is an important sentence, but the world they were in was not the world he was in. I want you to think about why that is. He would like to have one of them, but it was not worth it. They were such a nice pattern. He liked the pattern. It was exciting. So all of this kind of conflict is going on inside him. He wants one, but he doesn't, right? What's the conflict happening here? What's happening with him? But he would not go through all the talking. He did not want one badly enough. He liked to look at them, although it was not worth it. Not now when things were getting good again, right? So again, this idea of what's happening, what's the trauma that we see within this story. He sat there on the porch reading a book on the war. It was a history, and he was reading all about the engagements he had been in. It was the most interesting reading he'd ever done. Excuse me. He wished there were more maps. He looked forward with a good feeling to reading all the really good histories when they would come out with good detail maps. Now he was really learning about the war. He had been a good soldier. That made a difference. And I want you to think about, who does that make a difference to? And again, part of the underwater iceberg, who doesn't it make a difference to, right? And again, I want you to think about what's happening with the idea of him liking to read these stories. What's he trying to do as he reads these detailed maps and reads these histories? How is he trying to kind of piece together what happened to him? And this is it's all leading to this particular moment here. One morning, after he had been home for about a month, I want you to think about how long he's been home, right? That's an important part of the story. His mother came into his bedroom and sat on the bed. She smoothed her apron. I had a talk with your father last night, Harold, she said, and he is willing for you to take the car out in the evenings, right? So this is a couple, just some pointers for you in dealing with your mothers. This is a red flag. That's what we call a red flag. Whenever your mother is saying, hey, there's a favor that you can do, or there's something that you can have, there's going to be a catch to it. Yeah, said Krebs, who was not fully awake. Take the car out, yeah? Yes, your father has felt for some time that you should be able to take the car out in the evenings whenever you wished, but we only talked it over last night. I'll bet you made him, Krebs said. No, it was your father's suggestion that we talk the matter over. Yeah, I'll bet you made him, Krebs sat up in his bed. Will you come down to breakfast, Harold, his mother said. As soon as I got my clothes on, Krebs said. His mother went out of the room, and he could hear her frying something downstairs while he washed, shaved, and dressed to go down into the dining room for breakfast. While he was eating breakfast, his sister brought in the mail. Well, Hare, she said, you old sleepyhead, what do you ever get up for? Krebs looked at her. He liked her. She was his best sister. And that's something that we don't normally see. We don't see in this particular story is someone that he likes. What is it about his sister that he does like? What's different about her than the mother? What's different about her than the girls that he sees, right? So something's happening that's different. Krebs' mother came into the dining room from the kitchen. She carried a plate of 2 fried eggs and some crisp bacon on it and a plate of buckwheat cakes. You run along, Helen, she said. I want to talk to Harold. This is the second red flag. Whenever your mother wants to talk, it's there's something going on. She put eggs and bacon down in front of him and brought in a jug of maple syrup for the buckwheat cakes. She sat down across the table from Krebs. I wish you put down the paper a minute, Harold, she said. Krebs took down the paper and folded it. Have you decided what you're going to do yet, Harold? His mother said, taking off her glasses. No, said Krebs. Don't you think it's about time? His mother didn't say in a mean way. She seemed concerned. I hadn't thought about it, Krebs said. God has some work for everyone to do, his mother said. There can be no idle hands in his kingdom. I'm not in his kingdom, Krebs said. We are, all of us in his kingdom. Krebs felt embarrassed and resentful, as always. When you think about what's happened to him in the process of war. I've worried about you so much, Harold, his mother went on. I know the temptations you must have been exposed to. I know how weak men are. I know what your own dear grandfather, my own father, told us about the Civil War. And I have prayed for you. I pray for you all day long, Harold. Krebs looked at the bacon fat hardening on his plate. And we've seen this before. We've seen this with Jig. When the American brings up the procedure, she looks at the ground the table legs rested on. And here we see Krebs looking at the bacon fat hardening on his plate, right? He is emotionally shutting down and trying to escape from this conversation. There's something happening, right, within him. He doesn't necessarily like where this conversation is going. His mother continues. Your father's worried too, his mother went on. He thinks you've lost your ambition, that you haven't got a definite aim in life. Charlie Simmons, who's just your age, has a good job and is going to be married. The boys are all settling down. They're all determined to get somewhere. And you can see that boys like Charlie Simmons are on their way to being really a credit to their community. So again, I want you to think about what does his mother want for him? And why is that a problem for Krebs, right? What's going on? Krebs said nothing. So again, he's, trying to escape. Don't look that way, Harold, his mother said. You know we love you, and I want to tell you for your own good how matters stand. Your father does not want to hamper your freedoms. He thinks you should be allowed to drive the car. If you want to take some of the nice girls out riding with you, we're only too pleased. We want you to enjoy yourself. But you're going to have to settle down to work, Harold. Your father doesn't care what you start in. All work is honorable, as he says. But you've got to make a start at something. He asked me to speak to you this morning, and then you can stop in and see him at his office. Is that all? Krebs said. Yes. Don't you love your mother, dear boy? No, Krebs said. His mother looked at him across the table. Her eyes were shining. She started crying. I don't love anybody, Krebs said. I want you to think about whether that's true. Does he love his mother? Does he love anybody? Right? I want you to think about why that might be the case. It wasn't any good. He couldn't tell her. He couldn't make her see it. It was silly to have said it. He'd only hurt her. He went over and took hold of her arm. She was crying with her head in her hands. I didn't mean it, he said. I was just angry at something. I didn't mean I didn't love you. His mother went on crying. Krebs put his arm on her shoulder. Can't you believe me, Mother? His mother shook her head. Please, Mother, please believe me. All right, his mother said chokily. She looked up at him. I believe you, Harold. Krebs kissed her hair. She put her face up to him. I am your mother, she said. I held you next to my heart when you were a tiny baby. Krebs felt sick and vaguely nauseated, and we've seen that before in the story. When was the last time that Krebs feels sick and nauseated, right? This is a reaction to lying. I want you to think about what part did he lie? Did he lie about loving her, or did he lie about not loving her, right? Continuing on, I know, Mummy, he said. I'll try to be a good boy for you. Will you kneel down? Will you kneel and pray with me, Harold? His mother said. They knelt down beside the dining room table, and Krebs' mother prayed. Now you pray, Harold, she said. I can't, Krebs said. Try, Harold. I can't. Do you want me to pray for you? Yes. So his mother prayed for him, and they stood up, and Krebs kissed his mother and went out of the house. He had tried so to keep his life from being complicated. Still, none of it had touched him. I want you to think about what that means, right? That's a kind of a big Hemingway packed sentence. He had felt sorry for his mother, and she had made him lie. He would go to Kansas City and get a job, and she would feel all right about it. There would be one more scene maybe before he got away. He would not go down to his father's office. Again, I want you to think about why that is. He would miss that one. He wanted his life to go smoothly. It had just gotten going that way. Well, that was all over now, anyway. He would go over to the schoolyard and watch Helen play indoor baseball. So as we kind of finish this, I want you to think about why he goes to see Helen. What is it about Helen? And I want you to think about how we see him change. How was he before he went to the war? And how is he now? And what's happened in the aftermath of this? And thinking about PTSD and trauma, the medical community didn't really catch up to really understanding what happens to soldiers when they return from home until the 90s, right? That's when the diagnostic criteria comes out. Even in Vietnam, as soldiers were coming home, people recognized that they were changed. They recognized there were some deeper psychological problems there. But they didn't really understand the treatment for it. And so Hemingway, who writes this in 1925, it's about 70 years ahead of the scientific community with some of these elements that he points out. Just kind of thinking about some of these elements, getting through these, right? Did he have direct exposure that threatened his life? Check, right? We don't necessarily see intrusive memories in this particular story. There are other stories that Hemingway writes that do that. There are other Hemingway stories that do nightmares, but we don't see that in this one. Dissociative reactions, we don't necessarily see flashbacks, but intense and prolonged distress at exposure to traumatic reminders. I want you to think about whether we see that and where we see that in the story. We don't necessarily see the physiological reactivity. We don't necessarily see his body movements in this one, but we do see it a little bit more in A Big Two-Hearted River. Let's see, avoidance. Trauma-related thoughts or feelings. Do we see that in the story? Where do we see it? Trauma-related external reminders. Do people, places, conversations, activities, situations remind him that he's trying to avoid, right? Thinking about this, we don't necessarily see memory loss, but persistent, often distorted negative beliefs and expectations about oneself or the world, right? The world is completely dangerous. I am bad. Do we see that with Krebs, right? Persistent, distorted blame of self or others for causing a traumatic event. I don't know if we necessarily see that, but persistent negative trauma-related emotions, fear, horror, anger, guilt, shame. Do we see that with Krebs? How do we see it? Markedly diminished interest in pre-traumatic significant activities. He was in college before he had some type of faith before. These things all seem to be gone, at least at the moment for him. Feeling alienated from others, detached or estranged. Do we see him feeling detached and estranged from others? And then constricted range, constricted effect, persistent inability to experience positive emotions such as love. Do we see that, right? Irritable or aggressive behavior, self-destructive, reckless behavior, hypervigilance, exaggerated startle response, problems in concentrating, sleep disturbance, all things to kind of think about. Again, just kind of getting at that underwater part of the iceberg, some of the deeper elements that we can see. And that Hemingway, even though he doesn't fully understand it, the scientific community didn't understand it at the time, he was just writing about his experiences in the war. He was writing about truth. He was writing about life. And because he's getting so close to truth, it has that richness to it, has that deeper complexity that if we just kind of pass through this kind of quickly, we miss all of that. We miss all of that richness. And so we need to slow down the pace of our thought process and slow down the pace of our reading to really think about some of these masterpieces, because as we delve deeper, we get a richer experience from them.